Thank you. The last 5 years I've been managing our application for a new environmental permit for Arlanda. So I will give you a background to the environmental permit that restricts our aircraft operations, and also tell you a little bit about the activities that we're looking at for noise abatement. Stockholm Arlanda Airport is the biggest airport in Sweden, and last year we had 207,000 aircraft movements, 19.6 million passenger, which was all-time high, and roughly 16,000 employees, 80 airlines that serves 180 destinations. We have a runway system with 3 runways. A third of them is the newest one. So to be allowed to operate an airport in Sweden, you need an environmental permit, and the one we have for Arlanda today is, it originates from 1991, when the government gave admission to expand the operation with the 3rd runway. So they also attached a condition to this and said that the municipality of Upplands Väsby, which is 13 kilometers south of the runway, that it should have some kind of noise protection. It didn't specify exactly how, but over the years it has developed to condition number 6, which says that from the 1st of January 2018, we're not allowed to perform straight-in approaches to the runway at all. So of course we have condition in all courts at all levels, but it's still with us today. So we have now realized that the only way to get rid of it could be to apply for a brand new permit where you can review all airport operations and not only the 3rd runway. So after 5 years of investigations and studies and 25 formal consultation meetings, we had the first hearing in court a month ago, and we expect the first verdict by the end of November. And we also expect that we or somebody else will appeal this verdict, and that we can have a final judgment from the Supreme Court in 2015. And if the condition is still there, we will only have 3 years to solve this major problem for the airport, but also for Stockholm and Sweden. So this picture to the right shows radar tracks of arriving air traffic to runway 01 right, and you can see that if you want to avoid Upplands Väsby, you would have to perform some kind of curved approach. And we already have a curved approach procedure published to this runway today, but it's used very little. And we don't see that this is a solution for high-intensity traffic in many years. So what we now hope for is that it could be removed by the court, and that they can replace it with this action plan that we have submitted to the court and also committed to. So if we can't use the curved approaches to arrive to the airport, we will lose 22 arrivals per hour, and then we won't have the need for the 22 departments from the same runway either, which means that we will lose the whole runway. And it's not allowed, according to the permit, to use alternative runway patterns to accommodate these flights. So we will have a peak capacity of 44 movements, and already today we are almost at 78. The demand is always. So in today's and also in the coming environmental permit, we will have several conditions that will restrict the air traffic operations. The blue line here shows an FBN 55 contour, and FBN is a Swedish metric, it equals LDN. And the 4 lines in pink, they show restriction lines, and the noise contours is not allowed to go beyond those lines. And also, the annual curve that is calculated for the traffic is not allowed to exceed the FBN 55 decibel noise contour for the permitted traffic. So to be able to not to exceed the conditions, we have a preferential runway system which is regulated through the environmental permit. And for noise reasons, we use runway 1 and 2 as long as it meets the capacity demand. And in the next segment, we will use the parallel runways. And in the future, when we need more capacity than 84 movements, we will use mixed parallel operations. But it's not yet taken into operation at Arlanda. So this slide just shows that we have how we use the runway system for departures. And some of the runways can't be used other than for wind conditions or performance conditions during night, that is. And you can't deviate from the runway that you have assigned in the permit if you want to get a shorter taxi distance or departure distance, for example. For arrivals, we can use runway 26 as our main runway for arrivals. It's used during off-peak, and the predominant wind direction at Arlanda is southwest, so that works very well. And that's also beneficial from a noise perspective because there are no densely populated areas close to that runway. We also accept 5 knots tailwind, which makes it possible to land more from the north than otherwise would be the case. And during the night, we are not allowed to arrive to runway 01 right to protect Upplands Väsby. And this means that in northerly winds, we need to perform landings at runway 01 left, which has a residential area that is actually closer to the threshold than for the other one. So in accordance with our permit, we have noise-insulated 700 homes around the airport. So now in court, we have tried to find the point where we should go from minimizing the noise to look at CO2 emissions and climate change. And we believe that 70 decibels could be that point. It's used as a benchmark level for aircraft noise descriptions in Sweden and in many other countries. So today, an air traffic controller is allowed to let the departing aircraft leave the departure route at 1850 meters. And that corresponds to where an MD-80 creates noise levels of 70 decibels on the ground. And MD-80 is not at Arlanda anymore, and it's also quite noisy aircraft during takeoff and climb. So what we want to do is that every aircraft should be able to leave the departure seat when the noise level goes below 70 decibels. So the primary arrival pattern at Arlanda is the open star system combined with radar vectoring. And we also, as far as possible, try to combine it with CDAs, continuous descent approaches. And last year, 53% of the arrivals at Arlanda were performed as CDAs from 10,000 feet. We also have PRNAV, or closed stars, published to our off-peak runways. And there you follow a nominal track all the way to the final approach segment. And that makes the flight route shorter than before. And we did inform extensively about this in a collaborative body that the court has established, that we have to inform neighbors and municipalities. And the CDA concept was very well received, so because it was said to decrease both noise and emissions. So when we wanted to introduce the PRNAV stars, that was accepted because of the benefits of CDAs. So the few complaints we had drowned completely in the flood of criticism that we got when we opened the third runway. So To be able to avoid Upplands Väsby, we need a more advanced navigation method, and the published approach is an RMPAR approach, required navigation performance authorization required, and that's a GPS-based navigation that requires a certain onboard equipment and also requires approval from the authorities for every airline and also for each and every procedure that they want to fly. So it's not used much at all. I think we had 10 approaches last year or something, and it's a big challenge for us, of course, to describe to our neighbors why it's not used more. And these are some of the activities that we have to look further into in the action plan. The first problem is that we only use the runway when we need it for capacity reasons, so we don't have a chance to try this in low-density traffic. And we are not allowed to use it when we use the parallel runway for arrivals during off-peak. So it's not a solution for the future either when we need parallel mixed operations. There are also some weather limitations to it, and of course, the aircraft fleet. Last time we checked, we had about 30% of the fleet equipped with the right equipment, but that doesn't mean that they have all the approvals and all the training for the pilots. So another problem is that not to combine the straight-in approaches together with the curved approaches. So we definitely need to continue working on that. Runway 26 is much better runway for testing and implementing new technologies. So we actually performed, or we published the RMPAR approach to that runway as well. And we used it quite much. It's, I think, 2 airlines who can fly it today. And there were almost 350 approaches at this RMPAR path. And that saved us about 60 tons of CO2. We are also looking into GBus, if that can increase the usability of the RMPAR approaches and to give us a higher position for landing. As we heard before, GBus improves the accuracy, reliability, and availability of satellite navigation by adding some information that is sent back to the aircraft. So we have started a pre-project together with some airlines, SAS and Norwegian, and our Swedish navigation service provider, LFE, and Indra, who is an ATM equipment manufacturer. There are also other operational benefits. I think we've heard about all of them before. And one activity is to look into the equipage at the fleet at Arlanda, also to look into what trends there are at our major carriers. Also, in an attempt to really listen to our neighbors and the surrounding municipalities, we are looking at a PRNAV visual approach. PRNAV is a more basic navigation method than the RMPAR that we used for the curved approaches, and it's normally used for PRNAV stars, together with an ILS for landing. But in this case, we would use this RNAV path all the way to the threshold, but only in good weather when the pilot can perform a visual approach. But they would here have RNAV waypoints to guide them to create a more predictable flight path, because we have problems with the visual approaches. They don't always know exactly where they are. So there are several procedures like this existing around the world, but we don't have published anyone in Sweden yet. So this is the first try, and therefore we are starting at a smaller airport because the airspace south of Arlanda is the most complex in Sweden because its proximity to another airport, Bromma, Stockholm Airport. So we will start at a smaller airport to see if it's possible with the regulators. And we have, even though we have all these obstacles and we don't know if it's possible to use it at Arlanda, we have invited 2 of the municipalities to work together with us because we hope that we can learn to understand each other better and that they can get to know all the steps that we need to go through and all considerations we have to make before we can publish and use a new approach. These slides aim to show that the SID star system at our Swedish airports is to some extent undergoing a double regulation. We have the international regulation from Icana and EU coming down to the ANSP via the Swedish CAA. And on the right-hand side, we have the Swedish law, the environmental code that is applied to the airports in their environmental permits. And that also regulates the SID and STAR. So this takes a lot of time to go through both this. And even for testing and development, we need to go through this to some extent. So sometimes we think that Sweden is too small, or a regulator doesn't have resources to do anything else than just apply the ICAO regulation strictly. And we see that the trend is in that direction. So sometimes we think it would be beneficial for us if more of that could be done together at a European level. So finally, some lessons learned. One solution that works for one airport doesn't necessarily work everywhere, and it's very easy for just anybody to find an approach to some airport and claim that you should do it at your airport. So for us, it's very important to have a good knowledge about what you do at other airports, and also to learn from other airports, of course, it's very important. And we need to live with the changing requirements. We still don't know if the authorities want us to spread or to concentrate the flight paths, and this point for the trade-off between noise and emissions that I talked about, 70 decibels. We don't know that either. So it would be nice to have a parameter to optimize against. Also, it's a complicated world, so we find that it's very important to try to educate the decision makers so that they can be able to make the right decision and informed decisions. Of course, it's important with early communication with the regulator and also with all stakeholders. And finally, we have heard a lot about technology development and that the noise emissions will be decreased, hopefully, in the future. But also, it will not be eliminated completely, and it's a question of where to put the flight tracks. And the difficult part is to find a place where it's accepted. Sometimes it's a residential area, but also we have areas that should be quiet for, as you talked about yesterday. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and we have short time for some questions. So please, over here, Mr. Yue.
I will get mine.
I see your arm, it's okay. I see your arm, it's okay.
You operate with a 5-knot tailwind component. And are you interested in using 7 knots tailwind component for noise abatement?
I don't know. Actually, I just know that we accept 5 knots, and if the pilot accepts it, but I don't know. Is it beneficial from? Or do you mean that we could use the runway even more?
Can I ask you to come in? Use this mic because something has to be better. Okay, is it okay, Mr. Yu, or would you like to foster a little bit? Okay, bilaterally. Okay, there was a question over there. Please raise your hand again and then. Okay.
Short question this time, Annette. Why are you not allowed to use 01 left straight in ILS and 01 right curved approach RMP?
That's how we interpret the regulation and our CAA.
Okay, further questions? Okay, over here. There is a microphone. Please, here in the first row first, and then there. I give you the mic.
Hi, just to add information about the nodes. In Barcelona, we accept 10 for environmental reasons, not to change the configuration, but it's better for the noise in the zone.
Okay, maybe we should look into that. Yeah.
Okay. That's the reason of this conference, to exchange different views and different airports and different airlines and manufacturers, etc. So please.
Achim Heppner, Frankfurt Airport Magazine. Already make a decision about what you're talking about, spread or concentrate flight path?
What we have tried to do now, and what is tried in court, is to concentrate to 70 decibels, and then to be able to spread the flight paths.
So a combination.
Yeah, first concentrate and then spread.
Okay, thank you. Further questions? There is one question over there, please, and this is the final one.
Yes, Daniel Schad, Austro Control. I guess you do the RNP AR because of the use of fixed radius turns, is that correct? There is a new PBN regulation coming out now, and if you keep I just saw the chart, I don't know how long your final is, but if you keep the RF flag out of the final, you will be able to make it a non-AR approach, still using the RF flag. That might be a solution for you. And another option, because you mentioned visual RNAV, would be visual RNP, that you still use the RF flag, but in a visual procedure.
Was that a question?
No, that's just a comment.
Yeah, thank you.
No
it's
question
very
mark.
interesting.
I'm
yes,
just, yeah.
Thank you. Good comments.
Okay, thank you very much for coming and for your presentation. Okay, now, ladies and gentlemen,